Okay, so I'm gonna share the grading rubric. So, for English 104, where we're gonna start at is the annotated bibliography rubric. So I wanted you guys to see the rubric, and I reveal the rubrics ahead of time on all the assignments. If you didn't notice, you had it for the research proposal as well. And the reason I do that, number one, it's a transparency thing. I want you to see how I'm gonna grade, right? I'm not trying to hide anything. And if you're shooting for like, 100%, you gotta hit 5 in all these particular categories. And then if you look at the rubric, it also kind of gives you an explanation of, okay, if you want to get a 3 versus a 5 on point structure. So if you look at the rubric, the categories over on the left, and then at the top are the levels in the amount of points. So for example, in development, if there was no development evident, you're gonna get 0 points, right? If it's weak, it means very little of the writing clearly and succinctly discusses all sources using a combination of summary, paraphrase, quotation. So in other words, weak means you did it a little bit, right? Competent, it's some. Strong, most of your writing demonstrates this, and superior means every single one demonstrates these, right? So what you want to look at is a little bit in the description, which it says, writing clearly and succinctly discusses all sources. So that means in this annotated bibliography, you have to have 6. So you're looking for 6 sources. So all 6 of them, clearly and succinctly, which means you're not rambling on, you're very concise. And you are using a combination of summary, paraphrase, and quotation. This is something you want to pay attention to because that will keep you from superior to strong. You want to make sure you are identifying in each source these things, because the whole purpose of your annotated bibliography is so that you can pull from there and using it in your essay. So that's what development means. That's that particular category, okay? In style and tone. So essentially, I'm looking for coherence, sophistication, appropriate tone. In this particular one, in the annotated bibliography, I am looking for academic level writing, and I'm looking for third person. No I, no you, right? So it would be in this article, or useful phrasing that can be used within the essay would be, and then whatever it is in your quotation marks. Format and document design. This is your MLA, okay? So I am looking for MLA elements throughout the entire document. So a couple of things to kind of be aware of. Number one, make sure you have your header, that's your last name and running page number, right? And then don't forget your first 4 lines. And then don't forget you need a title, the annotated bibliography for your title, right? And make sure that you are double spacing 1-inch margins, okay? So all of those things are what I'm looking for all the way through it, okay? Mechanics, this is spelling, capitals, punctuation, that kind of thing. Citation formatting. For every single source, you start with the citation. And the citation has to be done correctly. So that means you need a hanging indent. It has to be double spaced just like the rest of your section for that source. You also want to make sure within the citation that you have italicized proper things. So for example, names of databases, those need to be in italics, right? Large containers are italicized. Small containers, things like titles of articles, those are in quotations, right? So pay attention to those things, because when I look at your citation, that's what I'm looking at is it formatted correctly? Hanging indent, double space, and then did you do the right things for italicizing, quotation marks, that kind of a thing. And then research. So in your research, did you consider all the requirements? In other words, did you successfully evaluate each of your sources? Now, what does successfully evaluate means? It means that, okay, it's a scholarly source, absolutely. But if it's not a scholarly, or you didn't get through the database, is it, did you use a crack test? Like on a website, maybe you got a really good website you're using, okay? Okay, did you about how, and so you need to indicate that in your writing somehow, okay? Okay, that is the rubric. So let me stop sharing on that. Let me get out of that one, and I'm gonna open a different one. Do you have questions on that one so far? Okay. Let's go to. Let's go to our instructions. And we'll work that one next. So the annotated bibliography instructions. And so this is found, by the way, back in module 5, when we started talking about the annotated bibliography. So if you're looking for more print copies of this, it's in module 5. I will try to remember to pull them down. Some of these things are embedded within the instructions, just so you know. And what I mean by that, remember, it's that green wording. If you come across that, that's a hot link to those items. So let's share this and talk about the annotated bibliography instructions, okay? So your assignment is the annotated bibliography. And in short, it's a list of the sources you have so far. And here's the other part of this. You need to plan to use these in your essay somewhere. So can you do the annotated bibliography on just random sources? Probably could. If you do it correctly, you'll probably score well. Where it's gonna come back and bite you is on looking for the sources in your essay. And if you have not got them, if you've not used them in your essay, it's gonna cost you really heavily. So keep in mind, this whole class is working on a scaffolding. This is the step before you're drafting. So what you're doing is you're going to all your sources, your notes, all this kind of stuff that you've been gathering for the last 2-3 weeks. And now you're like, okay, how would I use this in my essay? Okay, so word of caution, everything on your annotated bibliography, I better see in your essay. You can have more than those sourcing, right? You can have more than those, but you can't have less than those 6 that you are, sharing, okay? So these are the ones you're planning to use. So you're gonna complete this annotated bibliography. Here is what you gotta have. You gotta list all the sources you plan to use in your research paper. And you need to have the following things for every single source. So for all 6, you have to have the correct MLA citation. Now it says MLA 8, but we're working with MLA 9, just so you know. There's very little difference between the two, right? And we've been doing MLA 9 all the way through. So don't get too worked up. If you have a question, you can always ask me, but we're working with MLA 9. Then you have to also indicate for every single source, where did you find that source? So where did you get it from? So that should be in there. Then I want a brief summary of the source. In other words, roughly 3 to 5 sentences. And they has to start with the use of the ACTs. So we've talked about the ACTs before, and this is one of the places you're applying it. And ACT is, just to remind you, that is author, credibility or credential, title, and summary, okay? So I want you using the ACTs when you are using your source, okay? And I'm gonna show you on the sample where that's at, okay? And then tell me what the source is about. Now your source about is like your summary, that's the S, okay? And then you gotta tell me somewhere in there, you gotta give me a clear indication, how will you use this information in your essay? That's gonna be roughly 1 to 2 sentences. How that's gonna appeal to the audience, in other words, maybe directly compared to another source, that kind of a thing, right? And don't be afraid to say, ethos, pathos, logos. This is back from 103. So you could say, I'm gonna use this as pathos in order to be able to try to emotionally persuade my reader that this is a good thing, okay? And then also, what research question did this source help you answer? So remember, you're going all the way back to research questions you had to go find information about. And if you had more questions, then make sure you just indicate that, okay? And then your annotated bibliography also has to include a minimum of 6 credible sources. So these are 6 sources you're gonna use within your essay. 3 of those sources have to be from the library database. So double check, 3 of your 6 are from the SMC databases, okay? 2 of those 6 have to be scholarly or peer reviewed. So you have, and I'm gonna just kind of talk about this a second. You got 6 sources, you gotta have 6, right? Of those 6, 3 have to be the databases. And again, of those 6, 2 have to be scholarly. Now, the scholarly ones don't necessarily have to be the database ones. They can be. So you could have 6 sources, 3 are from the databases, and of those 3, 2 of them are scholarly. That would fit that bill, okay? You would do that. But they don't necessarily have to be. If you found a scholarly source somewhere else, that would also meet the criteria, okay? The rest of your sources can either be secondary books, websites, DVDs, but they all have to be credible and they all have to pass the CRAP test, which means currency, right, relevance, that kind of a thing. You are allowed to use 1 personal interview with a credible person. So I know we have talked, and I think I gave you a heads up. You are allowed to do interviews, however, you only get 1. And you only get to use 1. So if you are thinking on building your essay with like 6 interviews and pulling from that, that won't work. It's not gonna be allowed. You get 1. You are not required to have an interview. So if you're building your essay and you don't have personal interviews, that is totally fine. Totally fine. I'm just saying if you are using that as one of your sources, you only get it once. Okay, make sure your annotated bibliography is alphabetized by the author's last name. And then of course, if there's no author or whatever, then you go to the title, right? Make sure you're using MLA design on all of the items. And then you're gonna upload this to Moodle. So I'm gonna wanna polish. Now, that next sheet, this is a sample entry. So this would be 1 of the 6 you have to do, right? And this is kind of how it would look. Now ignore the top. It says sample entry for an annotated bibliography. You will not have that. You with me? That's just the title and underline. You won't have anything underlined. You won't have that. You would start, so what do you notice? The first thing is the citation. So this is the source, the citation. Notice it's a hanging indent, right? They have all the relevant information in there. Notice they quoted name of article, they italicized the larger containers, which are the journal name and the where it was found in that particular database, okay? And then they gave you the DOI. Now, if you have a choice between URL and DOI, I would like you to use the DOI. DOI is the more stable of the 2. If you have the URL, that's the HTTP thing, the URL and a DOI listed for your source, you use one or the other. You don't list them both, okay? So then, now let's take a look at what they wrote. So this is where we want to pay attention to the ACTs, right? I said you have to have the ACTs first. Author, credibility, title, and short summary, 1 to 2 sentences. Here we go. In their scholarly essay, Diabetes and Environmental Hazards, S.L. Thrower, diabetes specialist, and P.J. Bingsley, professor of health science, discuss the ways the environmental hazards can worsen the health of a person living with diabetes. So we're gonna stop right there. And if you've noticed, they have got the A, authors in there. They've got credibility, in other words, what their specialty is, right? credentials. They've also got the title in there, right? And the other thing they threw in right away is they indicated this was the scholarly source. Now, a word of caution, don't say it's scholarly if it's not. But clearly, this is gonna be one of their scholarly sources to meet one of the two. So they're indicating it right there, okay? Next, they show that when diabetics are not properly educated about how environmental hazards can impact their disease, the patients are at increased risk for heart attack, stroke, et cetera, et cetera. Throughout their essay, the authors offer very specific information on the steps a person living with diabetes can do, et cetera, et cetera. More specifically for environmental hazards, recommend diabetes reduce, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then take a look at that. They give you the page number. So what they're doing there is they're paraphrasing, right? They're not quoting, but they're taking the information from the author and paraphrasing it. And so then they did the in-text citation. That's the page in which they paraphrased.
So it's the 936.
Yes. So that's, if you remember, that's one of the requirements in development. Are you using quotations, paraphrasing, or summary, right? So they're using a little bit of summary there at the beginning. And then they are paraphrasing that next sentence. More specifically for environmental hazards, that's what they're paraphrasing from the article. Okay, now, after 936, here is where they're talking about how they're gonna use it in the essay. For the purpose of my paper, this information will allow me to focus on lifestyle changes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so they're telling me how they're gonna use it in the paper. The next line, most of my readers will assume lifestyle changes will revolve around nutrition. Okay, so that's telling me how it's going to appeal or address the audience. You with me so far? Okay. And it offers examples, connects with counterpoint that suggests diabetes issues. Okay. So the reason I wanted you to look at this and why we're talking about it is, you remember in those instructions where it said you got to have this, 1 to 2 sentences, that's where that is. I'm hoping that you can follow from this, and let me see. Let me try and open up the other one. Oh, no, that's another student sample. We'll talk about that one in a second. Up here. So if you go up here, it says a correct MLA bibliography entry, right? Okay, that's this first thing right here. Okay, that's the correct bibliography, you know what I'm trying, my tongue is stuck today. Okay. Where did they find the source? It tells us right here in that particular database, so I'm good there. ACTs, right here. ACTs, boom, boom, boom. I'm gonna go here. So there's author in there, there's credentials in there, there's the title in there, and they have a short summary, right? 3 to 4 sentences of that. On top of which they indicate that it's scholarly, okay? Now, the next one. Let me go right here. That is where they are paraphrasing, okay? So they're using part of that and they're identifying where they got it from. And then down here, this is where, or how, I should say, how they're gonna use it in the essay, how they're gonna use this information. And then here, this is where it appeals to the reader. In other words, how's it gonna benefit the reader? How's it trying to persuade the reader, kind of a thing, okay? So if you see this, you can see there's a match with those required information pieces. And then up here, this is only one. I'm going to show you a sample in a minute that'll have 6, but this particular one would meet a scholarly requirement. Okay. All right, so that is a sample. I have another sample for you. Oh, okay. Let me try again. Let me open this baby up. All right. You're gonna share. Student sample. I think this is it here. Okay. So again, this is on Moodle, but this is a draft annotated bibliography that someone had submitted, and we just took the names off, right? So let's take a look at this. You've got the header, you see the header, your last name and page number, right? Remember, it is your last name, not the words last name. I get that sometimes. People will write last name instead of actually giving me their last name. And then don't forget, it is a running page number. Running page number means it changes every page accurately. And then of course, the first 4 lines, your name, my name, we're English 104, and then the day, the month, and the year, in that order, spaces, no hyphens, any of that kind of stuff, no commas. Here's my title. Title is annotated bibliography, okay? So let's take a glance at this. Here's entry number 1. There's my hanging indent. Here is the citation, okay? Take a look at each one. That's how I know it's a new entry, by the way. There's your first one. Here's the second one, right? Here's the third one. Fourth one. Do you see how it is? So you're starting with the entry on every single one. You see how that's working? Make sense? Okay. The other thing I kind of want to point out to you on this is notice it's just double spaced all the way through. You're not giving me extra spaces after the citation, right? It just blends. How do I know where things do? It's that hanging indent, right? It's the citation, everything under that is for that citation, okay? So once again, almost every one of these is gonna start with the ACTs. So in the article, here's my title, here's the container, right? Credibility, okay? That's all in the ACTs. On each one, it also tells how it's going to be used within the paper. How are you gonna use this information in your essay? Yeah, go for it.
So when they taught us how to do an annotated bibliography in high school. And when they did that, the text aligned with the indentation all the way down. I'm guessing we're not doing that because we're not doing.
No, it would be left aligned.
Okay.
Yeah, for this one. So your first line, now it could have been, so keep in mind, I don't know how long ago you did this too, but you know, there's different versions of MLA.
Yeah.
MLA 7, 8, 9, I started with MLA 4. That tells you how old I am. English is an evolving language. It could be that it was a prior thing. The other thing, just so you know, is in MLA, there's kind of this clause that you know, the instructor trumps all. So if the instructor tells you to do something outside of what it is, that's what you need to do. I don't know if that's it, I'm not totally sure why, but for the purpose of what we're doing in here. Now, did you have 103 here?
Yeah.
So did that particular, the SMC instructor tell you that you had to have it start at the indent?
I don't
remember. I know, it's been a while ago, right? Okay, that's good. For the purposes, for the purposes of this one, everything is left aligned except that hanging indent. Okay, and if you want, I will double check on that. I don't think I'm wrong, but I'll be safe and just check on it for you. I don't want to misguide you, okay? So in each of these entries, you can see the required elements, right? So this is just a really good sample for you to follow. That was a good question. Any other questions? I mean, I could read this to you, but you don't need me to read. You all know how to read. So the other thing I want to kind of point out, you have 6 entries. Notice every single entry takes almost a full page. So that's kind of a measure for you when you are doing yours. If you are only getting, you know, a quarter page on your annotated bibliography entry, you're probably not developing it with all the elements that need to be there. And that's why on those instruction sheets, I tell you, I kind of give you an estimate of how many sentences need to be it. Now, again, sentences is kind of a rough estimate because sentences can be really short or they can be really long, right? I'm not talking simple sentences. I'm talking compound complex sentences at the college level. But I don't measure it by sentences. I don't measure it by length, right? I'm measuring it by when I'm reading it, are you including all of the required information that I ask you to within the instructions? That's what I'm measuring it at. But I can tell you, if you're getting less than, you know, half page, 3/4 page on each one, you're not fully developing all those requirements. Probably. Does that make sense? Okay. So, I'm not sure how long the sample is. I'm guessing 6 pages. Yeah, six pages. So, you know, roughly one per source, but not all your sources will be really long. There may be sources that are a little bit shorter. Basically, because if you have a source that doesn't have a lot of information, you can't write a lot about it. But I would give you a little bit of a warning on that. If a lot of your sources are like that, you may need to develop more sources. Because you really need some meaty sources to pull from, read, and whatever to kind of inform yourself to be able to write the essay appropriately and include the things that are being persuasive. Okay. Good, bad, ugly? No? No Clint Eastwood fans. I looked at my,
What?
oh, okay, I grew up watching Clint Eastwood.
I also am.
Okay. I was on my Facebook feed, this morning, apparently Clint Eastwood, it said happy birthday. He's 95 today, 95, good for him.
Well, he still did that movie, what?
Yes, I mean, that to me is just amazing, 95 and you're still working.
Yeah.
I mean, oh, of course, you know, if I had that kind of money, I'd have everybody doing all the menial stuff, but, still, nothing to
Have you
sneeze
seen that
at.
movie, The Mule?
I have not.
It's a good one.
I have not seen, I mean, I know he went into directing and directed for years.
Yeah.
I have not seen a lot of his later work, probably, I would dare say after 2010.
Yeah.
Number one, I just don't do, whoops, hold on, let me stop recording, give me a second. Cause nobody cares about my Clint Eastwood talk. Let me stop recording.